Hello and welcome to Net That Haul. This is the Game Week 26 matchup show. I'm, of course, FPL Nemo, and I'm joined by my co-host Gabriel at FPL Lens on Twitter. How are you, man? It's a crazy game week, wasn't it?
Man, it's like the worst game week with
Phoenix Councilman Carlos Garcia has
with the kind of the most points. It's like it's the worst I've felt having this many points after a game week, I think. But as always, Nemo, we do have to start off with a quick sound check, make sure we don't have any gremlins in the equipment this morning. No FPL crackle on this side on this side of the pond. So the haulers in the room, which currently we have Blue Danube Joe and Travis Nickel. Yeah, let us know if we have any sound gremlins.
Yeah, shout out to you guys for tuning in live as well. We will get this show on the road. So I think the first thing to kind of just talk about is obviously there's a huge amount of information that's come out since the FA Cup fixtures. And we now kind of have this idea that doubles that could have potentially been in 34 are unlikely to happen. So there's looking like to be either 4 or 6 doubles in both 34 and 37. And, you know, compared to the 12 we have in 29, it's very clear that the blank in 28 isn't as big as we thought. The blank in 32 isn't as big as we thought. And a lot of chip strategies seem to have been brought forward, you know, A, by people who kind of went in really heavy on Liverpool and want to move on, and B, even those who didn't. So I think I'm going to try and not be stubborn throughout the course of the show, because I know you might wildcard and you might even activate it on air, right? So it's going to be an interesting episode. But maybe I will wildcard by the time the deadline comes around. I don't want to do this, but, you know, this information that we've got on screen now, I guess, for the podcast listeners as well, like, what do you guys think you're doing? Tweet us up until the deadline. The good news is we have one normal game week ahead. So game week 26, which is what we're focusing on this week in the matchups. And we'll look at the captaincy metric, because I think there's some interesting shouts for who could be captain this week. And do we return to Haaland, or is there a better option? So that's kind of what we've got for you today. If you do enjoy the episode, if you find it entertaining, do hit that like button. Otherwise, let's go into the philosophy of the week, and then we can kind of come back to this strategy as we work our way through different matchups, and we'll get to the Q&A at the end. I think we're not
really quickly, before we get into the philosophy, I do have a shout out to give and a big thank you. So our friend and hauler Nick Khan, Jared's in the house, Fantasy Pavilion, and Akib is here as well. Nice to see you, Akib. I hope you're doing okay, buddy. And Salah the Samurai, thanks for joining us. But yeah, so Nick Khan on Twitter, Nick Khan tweets. He lives in New York, and he knows that one of my main favorite club obviously is Real Madrid, but my other one is FC St. Pauli, because I love the culture, I love the ethos, I love the counterculture element of it. So he was at the East River Pirates bar in New York and got me this T-shirt. So it's FC
nice.
St. Pauli, East River Pirates. So yeah, big shout out. Thank you, Nick. My first real FC St. Pauli gear. So much appreciated. A little gratitude before we head into this week's philosophy.
Sounds good. I think this week is one from a man that I know too well, Friedrich Nietzsche. I don't know how you would pronounce it, Gabe.
Yeah, that's perfect. Friedrich Nietzsche brings us this week's philosophy, and there's a little bit of a backstory behind the philosophy this week. So I actually used I'm sure we've all been hearing in the news the resurgence or the surgence of ChatGPT, a product of OpenAI. So I used ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to come up with a quote from a philosopher that relates to FPL. So I went to some artificial intelligence for some help this week, much like many students around the world are doing to write their research papers and so on and so forth. So big ups to all you students who are using the latest in technology to get ahead in your careers. Don't let any teacher tell you it's wrong. So I used it for these purposes, and it busted out this quote from Friedrich Nietzsche: "Without music, life would be a mistake." And then it unsolicited gave me an explanation. And here's the explanation. I cut out the best part of the explanation, and it is in the matchups thread on Twitter. It is included there. And it said, just as music can bring meaning and richness to our lives, so too can a well-executed FPL strategy bring satisfaction and enjoyment to the game. And then I added, create your own music. So as we have all of this new information, and it's super exciting, we can see Ben Krellen's planner, and it's all laid out for us, and like, oh wow, I can actually make a plan now. Yeah, enjoy it. This is the music of FPL, and it is what will differentiate your FPL song from the songs of the rest, and hopefully may see you up the ranks.
Yeah, no, I think this is it. This is when the music starts, right? These are the last 13 game weeks to go. Let's have some fun. This is the best part. Definitely. And that's part of why I'm wondering whether, is there any reason to hold on to my wildcard and chips? Because I could hold on to them and like limp through and use them later, but part of me is like, I could just kind of jump in.
Yeah.
Like whether it's this week or next week, but I could jump in pretty soon. So I'm going to be thinking about the music as we go throughout the show. That's for certain. So we'll go into the first matchup of the week. As always, we will star your questions as well for the Q&A at the end. But this is worth putting on the screen, definitely, Gabe. I think obviously big news in the FA Cup yesterday. Mariner, fellow Grimsby fan here. I'm now a Grimsby fan too. He made it all the way from Singapore to watch them beat Southampton. So what an epic night. And I'll let you read out his son Kieran's quote as well.
So Kieran tells us, afternoon all, just want to confirm that Mariner was in full voice last night. Don't think his heart would have held out through extra time or penalties. Up the Mariners. Indeed, up the fucking Mariners. I love seeing those tweets of the Grimsby's non-penalty XG, blah, 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 blah. Southampton had 22 shots and only got 3 on target. Fuck off. You don't deserve to be there. So no disrespect to Southampton or the club, because I do think they're a great club, and the fans are great too. We know Lucy on Twitter and all of that. But don't give me this XG talk.
Definitely. So that was a big night. They're through to the quarterfinals. I believe they're playing Brighton away in the next leg. So another South Coast match. And we will see if they can make it to the famed semi-finals, even all the way to Wembley. Imagine. The dream is alive, and this is why we love football. So the first match is the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. Man City versus Newcastle. I know there's some still City owners out there. Morris has been getting dropped back to back. Foden looks pretty hot. Grealish doesn't look like he's going to be dropped either. So it's really a tough call here, because what do you reckon about this match? Because, you know, I'm benching Trippier for one. That's kind of the context I'm going to set before we go through the data. I thought I have 3 defenders who this is the week to go against his EO and not play Trippier just for the sake of how highly owned he is. So I'm interested to know what you think as well, and whether you're looking to move off City assets in general.
I feel like we just can't trust City assets anymore, right? We know they're going to do something, but we don't know who it's going to be or when or what the rotation is, or if it is a rotation, or if it's something else, if it's circumstance dependent or anything like that. What I will say is I think Newcastle's stats are a little bit depressed here because they haven't had Bruno Guimaraes lately. I know he's back now, so he will certainly make a difference with his ability to spread the ball around. The NetxG 1.32 for City, 1.27 for Newcastle, so quite close here. Just looking at the individual metrics, I mean, most of City's production comes from what they create, and I mean they do take some shots, but the shots they take aren't, you know, they don't add anything to what they're creating. So I think we're seeing a little bit depressed stats here from both teams. You know, it was a 3-3 last time they met, but I think this one will be a little bit more cagey. In City's match against Bournemouth, which I don't really expect Newcastle to set up like Bournemouth, but I thought this was worth showing because we see all of the creativity in the passing and the pass map on the right hand side, on City's right hand side, and the left hand side. Grealish is you know, nobody wants to play with Grealish, right? They'll take the free kick that he wins after cutting right.
Yeah, he's just getting up the pitch and then kind of trying to keep the ball or recycle it backwards or get fouled, right?
Well,
always looking to get the free kick and the advantage.
Yeah, and I think this makes City extremely predictable, to be perfectly honest, especially against a tactically astute team like Newcastle, with a manager like Eddie Howe. I think despite Newcastle's bizarre passing map against Arsenal, that's a reactive passing map, right? So when you sit back in a shell, Arsenal had most of the possession. Newcastle gets the ball quickly to the left, and then look to work the ball over back to the right. But that's opposite what they normally do. Newcastle usually create from the right, and they like to work it to the left into space. If you kind of combine the passing maps, I think they'll do the same thing. I think because most of the ball will be on City's right-hand side, Newcastle's left most of the time. So we'll see a similar passing network as we saw for Newcastle, as we saw against Arsenal. And that kind of, I think that limits their effectiveness. So I think both sides are kind of limited. And this, I don't see much good. I think there will be goals, but not many. So I don't think this is a good match for fantasy purposes. So with that said, it does feel like a good time to sell these assets. We'll talk about this like Holland another time, or in another segment, like when we talk about Wildcard and stuff like that, whether that's a viable strategy or not.
Yeah, I think we can talk about the assets when we come to kind of what the decisions are of the week, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about selling Mahrez. Maybe they still got Aki or Akanji. Is it the week to get rid of them? You could argue that you might see a clean sheet here, so perhaps it's not. But then the question is, can you beat the rotation and the Pep Roulette, which in recent weeks has kind of heated up more, and Champions League is going to be underway fully. So I'm not too convinced. I think Haaland is enough for me, and there's in fact some people looking to even sell Haaland. So I'm sure we'll talk about that in the Q&A, where they're thinking to go through 26 and 29 without him. Obviously, he blanks in 28. He has a single fixture. It's not looking too great. So I wouldn't personally be selling him, but again, some people have a lot of team value and they just want to ride the wave of someone who's got like 5 fixtures in the time Haaland has 2. So I can understand doing it in the short term, as long as you can buy him back. Yeah. All right. So I think aside from this, then the question when we get to it later as well will be the captaincy. So I think we can talk more about Haaland when we look at the captaincy metric. I wonder if he's kind of clawed his way above any of the other assets. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, overall, I'm going to say that my personal neck on the line, I think it's going to be a draw. And I think City are going to drop 2 points. But let's see if I'm right about that. How about you? Do you think I'm too optimistic here? Are my Arsenal lenses on?
No, I don't disagree with you. I think it'll be a low scoring draw. Or
1-1 or 0-0, hopefully. Who knows?
Or it could be like a 1-goal margin, one way or the other. Like I think Newcastle could very well win it by a goal, just as City could win it by a goal as well. But I think it'll be a cagey,
like you said. Yeah, definitely cagey. So Arsenal versus Bournemouth. I see 3 o'clock, third game in a row where the Premier League leaders are not on TV in the UK, in the country that the league is in. So always interesting to see the TV decisions in this nation, but I'm sure you have no problem watching these games.
I mean, I never even think about these things, like who's on when. Like I don't care. I mean, at this time of year, the first games start at 5:30 in the morning. Once the spring hits, it'll be 4:30 a.m. I'll be up for those early games.
That's how I know you're doing your eye test nice and bright early in the morning.
That's right.
No match of the day for you. So I think for me, the big questions for Arsenal this week are, I'm an Nketiah owner, and it's obviously been 2 games that he's not started. He's flagged now as well. There was quotes about him kind of carrying something and having to be checked, and he's been carrying it through a lot of games. He's played, full minutes in every game apart from the last 2 since the World Cup, and even stuff like Oxford in the Cup, he played the full match there. So it sounds like he's carrying something. We look a lot more fluid, I was going to say, with Trossard up top. I feel his drifting to the left and kind of allow Martinelli to float back into the middle. It's definitely revitalized us a bit after a bit of a kind of road bump along the way. So if Eddie is carrying a knock and, this is an ideal fixture, this also tempts me for wildcard a bit, because then I feel like Eddie's a problem and I could get to the better Arsenal player I want for this juicy home fixture against Bournemouth. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in my thinking. It's kind of the Eddie question, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other assets in the captaincy, because, there's an argument to have 3 Arsenal midfielders. If you were crazy, you could have Martinelli, Saka, and Odegaard. But we'll see if anyone out there is doing that on their wildcard.
I would like to see that team, and this is where the reasons for wildcarding begin to mount, right?
Two matchups in, and I'm like, okay, I'm happy with just Haaland. Second matchup in, I need to change Eddie. You know, have I made a bad choice selling Martinelli? I don't know.
Exactly.
And we're not even like, there's still 8 more matchups just this week before the doubles come and the blanks. There's so much I could fix, right?
Like less than 20% into the matchups, and we already have 2 reasons to wildcard. I mean, you're sitting there. Imagine you're sitting there with Mahrez, De Bruyne, and Nketiah. Who else?
Patterson.
Double Newcastle defense. Botman, you know. Maybe you have Shaw, who's gonna blank. Like these are all good reasons to wildcard. In this one, what surprised me in this one was that Bournemouth has a full solid 1 NetxG. Arsenal at 1.47. The 1.47 I think is low as well, and that comes from as far as NetxG goes, that comes from Neto's form away. So I think Arsenal, I think Bournemouth, obviously they'll sit in a deep shell, and they'll try to force Arsenal to take shots from distance, which kind of boosts Neto's ability because the shots are coming from further away. So I think this one just depends on what you think is going to happen in the game. If Arsenal is going to get the penetration they need, or if Odegaard will have his shooting boots on, so to speak, then you bump up our Arsenal's number here. The FDR really feels quite differently. There's like negative 2.6 for Bournemouth attack, plus 3.1 for Arsenal defense. These are just, I mean, polar numbers here. So Mariner loves Arsenal for a potential romp here at home. What I will say is I put some heat maps on here. If you look at, and it's all, they all relate to Arsenal. So the first one is Arsenal's XG shot map against Leicester. Leicester sitting back in a shell. You see the concentration of shots around the box on the right side and in the center. That's all Odegaard territory against a deep block. And I think that could be repeated here. And then we look at Bournemouth. This is their previous game against City, right? This was against City. You see on the image in the middle there where the chances are created from. The chances are created from the right side and from deep, but the shots are all taken centrally. So I think Saka could be the chance creator in this one, trying to spread the Bournemouth back line wide and then getting penetration to the end line. And I think that ball is going to come back to Odegaard, and I think Odegaard is going to be more on the goal element of this fixture, and Saka be on the creation element. But I do think most of the action is going to happen on that right side. So I love Arsenal assets. I mean, that's easy to say. But I think I would, as if you're looking for example, captaincy, you don't want Haaland in a tough, potentially cagey matchup against Newcastle, and you're looking at Arsenal. I think I'd favor Odegaard over Saka this week. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think even now, still people who went Martinelli to Odegaard, I think overall, like, you're probably more guaranteed the minutes from Odegaard. And if you kind of look at Martinelli, since people wanted to get him off in game week 23, I think it was, he has been the X minutes threat we thought, but then he played 2 90 minutes in a row. And I think that wouldn't have happened if Eddie was fully fit. So I do think that people shouldn't be too hard on themselves, essentially. So, like, he got 26 points in the double and, like, he flew. But I do think he is will be continuing to be, you know, someone who's going to get less minutes on the pitch than Odegaard. So overall, that would be like kind of the asset. Like, I'm an Nketiah owner, and Odegaard would be someone who I would want to get to instead of Nketiah if I was to wildcard, for instance. So I like both of them, though. In terms of captaincy, I still think I'd go Saka personally ahead of the 2. So just the reason for that, I think I told you this over the last months. I've been saying that I felt Saka was our most important player, our talisman. And finally, the global media seem to have caught up. And I remember that I shared with you that they finally tweeted out saying all 10 of Saka's Premier League goals have come to either bring us level or to go ahead in a game. So, like, that's what I always said. Like, if we're not winning, we rely on him to change the game state. If we're losing and we need to draw, if we're drawing and we need to win, he's like going to always necessarily, any goal he gets will be the first one. So I do see kind of him getting an early one. And then I could see another kind of, because it's a home fixture, I could see another 3-4-0 here. So I'm definitely looking at the captaincy in this matchup personally over the City game.
You know, I think he's the talisman as far as because he's the leader and he's matured so young, right? He's become a leader at such a young age. But I think the playmaking talisman on the team is actually Odegaard.
That's why it's great to have both though, right? So that's why I feel like I've missed out, because they're the two who are likely to play 90 minutes the most often as well across the rest of the season. I feel like they're like the best for long term if you want them. Now I've realized like people like Nketiah, I always knew I'd have to sell him eventually. So at least I wasn't deluded enough to come into this not thinking that. But obviously it happened before Jesus' return.
I think that's what Arteta's telling himself, right? Has told himself the whole time. It's like, Nketiah, I always knew I'd have to sell him eventually. I just needed to keep him.
He's just like Balogun isn't going to be happy to be third choice, and he's golden boot racing in France with Neymar, Mbappe, Messi. So he's like, he's not going to stay if he's third choice. So one of them is getting sold, and I don't know what people think. But...
Well, Balogun will be the new Nketiah. And then
exactly. It's like work our way through the system. It sounds like we're learning to sell some players like Chelsea potentially, but we've always been pretty bad. They just kind of go for free, or we terminate and pay for them to leave. But it's a new generation, new squad. Yeah, let's go to the next matchup. But I think this was very interesting. One thing I will say just about a deep block actually is I know we have struggled to break them down recently, but I do think that when you look at our fixtures since the turn of the World Cup, we have kind of played quite difficult fixtures overall. So, we played the likes of Brentford, City, we've Newcastle. These were all games that we've kind of had issues in. Everton, just as the new manager took charge, for example. And we've got through all of this. We've lost to City, and then we've kind of won 3 games on the trot. And I think these other teams that we're going to face, like Bournemouth and stuff, I don't think they have the personnel or the attributes to pull off those deep blocks that you saw from the likes of kind of Everton or even Leicester, who themselves tried to keep us from any chances, recorded the lowest XG I've ever seen. But, they tried to stop us, and we just about got through. I feel like for us in Everton, it felt like that for the first 40 minutes last week, or was it last night even? And until we got the first goal, we were kind of struggling to get through. But what changed, and this is what I was going to say, which is really interesting about the team's positional play, is if you notice, Gabe, on the first goal, right? Firstly, how Saka received that ball from Zinchenko. There was like 4 players calling for the ball, and Saka was like the worst one to pass it to in that situation in terms of difficulty and risk. It got through to him on his weaker foot. He smashed it into the top of the net. So that was nuts in itself. But if you look to get past the amount of players they had there, we had Zinchenko playing on the right? So he was like an attacking right centre mid. We had Martinelli was on the right wing in this move. So it's like everyone, Xhaka was in the striker role, like Trossard was on the left wing holding width. Like these were not in the positions they appear in the lineup. And I think that's something you're going to see more and more as this team grows in confidence and takes it one game at a time, and they get closer and closer. I think you're going to see they're always going to find a way to unlock it. But the negative thing here is all the goals kind of generally shared around. So you're not going to have like a Rashford or Haaland where they get all the points. And that's the thing. It's like when you captain an Arsenal attacker, you don't know if you're going to get the right one. And overall, the question is, do you want 3 attackers instead of the defender? That's the kind of question. But then there's so many good double game week assets. So now I'm leaning more towards, if I wildcarded this week, I would get a defender. And I'm not sure who it would be, but we'll come to that later on.
I actually think the midfield is quite difficult to pick on wildcard.
It is, isn't it? Because it could be like, even for all we know, like Trossard could be in, right? So he's another like rogue punt. He's no different to when people bought Nketiah. We don't know when Jesus is back yet. So there's a lot of options. It's going to be quite tough to pick, I think. So that means 2 of them is probably good. And then that leaves you 3 spots for double game weekers from the likes of Brighton, right? And then you might want Leicester and other teams.
Or if you're more comfortable picking defenders, you might just want to go with the 3 midfielders because you don't know who to pick in midfield. So you go, I'm going to pack it with the Arsenal guys and someone,
and 2 others, yeah.
2 out of the 3 will get something and 1 will blank, and just like keep it like that. I don't know. I haven't seen that approach or explored it myself, but it would be interesting to see.
So this is another team that's a favourite for wildcard, Aston Villa. Obviously, they played Bournemouth at home in game week 28, and they have a double in 29. So any love for Ollie Watkins here? I think it's 5-5 for him now. Do you kind of foresee this continuing?
Well, it's tough, right? Because 5-5 is pretty ridiculous, and you do see like he just gets something where an obvious chance, at least one obvious chance every match, right? And so it's tough to bet against them. But it must be noted that Aston Villa, they're outproducing, or they're outperforming their XG by crazy amounts. So you have to wonder if that is entirely sustainable. You can see it in the XG shot map there. Aston Villa with 2.09 XG out of how many? 2, 4, like 8 shots, 7 or 8 shots, 3 or 4 of them in the box, and they got over 2 XG from them. So they're really sucking XG out of the chances, but they're not getting many chances. So that's the concern with Aston Villa. That being said, you know, you could say the same thing in a positive light. Aston Villa are extracting the most XG out of their plays than any other team. That should continue because of Emery's setup and because of Watkins's quality. So I think it's just like however you want to spin your narrative. But I think it's definitely one to question. For example, if Tony is an automatic and Holland is a question, like, are you going to go Watkins over Holland? Like, what's the upside there is Watkins continues to score.
He does have a great run of fixtures in the next 7, doesn't blank. So I think he could be an option for some people who don't want to take X minutes risks on, you know, and they're not on Wildcard, for example. I think the people on Wildcard, they're looking at even like the likes of Iheanacho. He's another option. So if you've got Eddie and you're moving him on, Tony feels like an obvious one, but he's on 8 yellows, so we don't know what's going to happen there. And obviously he's got a trial here and potentially early April or even before. So it's a difficult situation to be in. I really liked Watkins before the news dropped. He was someone who I thought I was definitely going to get in. But, you know, as he doesn't double in 27, I think he could be someone you move in with a free transfer in 28 and then have him for his double in 29. So I'm not looking to go there soon. And in terms of the defenders and Mings and stuff, I think, again, they were like probably okay assets without a wild card. But if you're on a wild card, you can change things up so much. I don't know if I'd be looking to go there when there's the likes of kind of Ethan Pinnock or Rico Henry, Ben Mee. You know, there's Brentford defenders. There's other great options, right? Brighton as well. So, yeah, I don't know if I could go to the Aston Villa defense is my main thing.
Yeah, and just look at Aston Villa's creativity metric, the one right next to the NetxG number. It's below 1. It's 0.99 for creativity. And that shows how few chances they are creating. And one thing that the metrics agree that they like Palace's attack more than Villa's attack in this one.
I wouldn't have expected to see that, yeah, but I guess it's interesting, right?
If two metrics agree on that, and when we think of Palace attack, we don't want any part of it, right? And statistically, Palace's attack doesn't measure up to Villa's attack, so why would we want a part of Villa's attack, right? I don't know that I necessarily agree with Mariners matchups FDR here. 3 big chances for Palace, almost 6 shots on target, more than 10 shots in the box. I don't think Palace is going to generate anywhere near those numbers. So I wouldn't rate Palace's offense higher than Villa's. But the fact that that's even a conversation kind of makes me shy away from a player like Watkins.
Yeah, so I think let's keep going. We'll get some of the more exciting games now. So Brighton versus West Ham. For a long time, Mitoma seemed like the best asset. We've been seeing him play much wider recently. So, you know, that could change. They could change system or style at any moment. So I wouldn't say like don't buy him or sell him just because of that. He's not getting the same number of chances just because he is further out wide and being more of a creator. We've talked about McAllister. He's also been playing as a bit of a creative number 10. But in the cup game, we noticed he dropped back into the 2 CM roles. And I think you said maybe it's because Gross wasn't playing. So maybe he does move back to the number 10 with Lallana out. And then that kind of leaves Solly March. So there's 3 Brighton midfielders. It's similar to Arsenal again, where it's really hard to predict which of the 3 to go for. Or I think many are going to go for 2 of them. You know, they've got the doubles. They've got some great doubles. The only issue is they don't play in 28. So what are your thoughts as well from a goalkeeping perspective on Sanchez? Because he's someone who I'm seeing as a second goalkeeper for a lot of people. And that way, when he doesn't play in 28, you can still go heavy on doubles in 27, have maybe 5 doublers, but field 9 or 10 people in 28 without a free hit because one of your doublers is actually a goalkeeper, a backup goalkeeper at that. So that's something that's interesting me as well. If I was to wildcard, I think Sanchez is right up on my plate. And then I would probably want double midfielder. I think Mitoma and McAllister for me, as long as we think McAllister's going to kind of stay in that 10 role.
Yeah, I mean, for those, if you have a free hit, then you can go kind of all in on Brighton. But if you don't, like for example, for myself, that I use my free hit in 25, you know, I have Rashford, I have other players, so I can't go for double Brighton midfield because then I won't have enough. Then I won't have 11 for 28. So you do have to kind of like be careful how you make your bed with Brighton. Definitely after 28, look to pile on, but Sanchez, I think it's kind of between Sanchez and Kepa for that second goalkeeper spot, right? With the acknowledgement that Raya is probably the best one to get with the upcoming.
So the thing is, if you go Raya, then you don't go Sanchez because you can't play them both in that 27 double.
They both, right.
Yeah, so I think, well, it depends how, because I think Brighton's double in 29 is probably better. But it just kind of depends.
Wait, why don't you go? Do they both blank?
They're both double in 27, and then Raya doesn't blank in 28. But then you could maybe bench boost them in 29.
Yeah,
they both double again. Yeah,
but so what?
You're gonna have a difficult decision between.
Why is that a reason to not get them? Because they both double.
Because then you wouldn't get an extra double of that week because you can only play one of them in 27. So if you wildcard this week and get both, you can only play one of them. So even though you've got like 5 doublers in your team, you actually only have 4. So like, let's say you have Tony, you have Mitoma, and you have like Ben Mee, right? And then you add in Raya, that's 4. If Sanchez is your 5th, you can't play him that week. So to get an advantage, like to get as many doublers as you can, this is the fine balance, right? It's how many Brighton do you get over Brentford, knowing Brentford don't blank? And that's what leans me to the idea that maybe like getting an outfield player from Brentford, like a Ben Mee.
But that depends on your chip. But that depends on your chip strategy as well. It's not like that's if you because if you don't, like, I just don't see a problem getting both, and you bench one of them, and you play the other. If you're on wildcard right now, why?
Because you could get like let's say like Ward, right? If you think Leicester will have like a better double in 29 for the bench boost, you might go there, for example, or Chelsea if you think they're double those. You might want to go Raya and Kepa. You might want to go Raya and Ward. So just from your chip strategy point of view, as you were saying.
Right.
Now, some people did debate maybe bench boosting in 27. They said, you know, they'd like to know why everyone wants to do it 29. Obviously, it's because it's the biggest one. But there is a case for 27 as well, right? Like a lot of the teams have okay fixtures. You don't want to bench them. So
you don't have to bench boost the biggest double. Bench boost your best double for the players that you have, like in the fixtures and all that. If it ends up being 27, then do it in 27. But I do want to bring the conversation back to the midfielders because there is a lot of we were both watching The Wire before this. Hopefully they join us when they're finished. But they were saying that it's just like if you can have a 3-sided coin, it's like a 3-sided coin toss. And I get that that's kind of true, but it's not. We don't just throw our hands up and say we can't understand this. This isn't like chaos, right? That said, we didn't come in and say, all right, you guys do whatever the fuck you want, and then whatever happens. That's not how football is played, right? So it's about discerning what their roles are, and in my opinion, these are the roles. So March is obviously Sully March does the weak side runs for the quick switch of play. So Brighton will possess on the left-hand side, as you can see there by the passing network. There are more passes on that left-hand side, and Sully March gets isolated on the right. Now, each of the picks have their warts as well. Sully March's wart is, well, to be perfectly frank, he's a wingback. He's trained as a wingback. This is what he's always done. So him playing further forward on the wing is unnatural to him, and he's not the best finisher. So he's going to miss a lot of chances, and he's not going to get as many chances perhaps as the other players in certain games because he's like that, okay, things aren't working out, go to the other side kind of role. AMA, McAllister, he's the overload specialist with creativity and finishing. So he'll, from that 10 position, when he does play that 10 position, and that's a risk with McAllister as well, is he may not always play that. Pascal Gross may be rested. Lallana could come back healthy at some point, right? And so his spot could be at risk. So he benefits from passing, right? Passing combinations, and he'll go and he'll try to triangulate with the other players. So in games where they need to break down the opponents through passing, maybe McAllister could benefit from that if he's receiving that final pass kind of in that central area, which is a danger area. And then you have Mitoma, who I like to, this is a term from FPL teacher. He's the agent of chaos. When they're unable to break down a defense, or when defenses are kind of sitting deep, and he's basically their Jack Grealish, right? Give him the ball, let him run with it, let him destabilize the defense, and then run into the pockets that are created from his dribbling. So all of these things, any one of these three things can be productive. All three of them can be productive in the same game. And I think the game against West Ham is a game that could be kind of tricky. And in different parts of the game, either one of these things could be productive. So I think it is a bit of a crapshoot for this one. But I prefer McAllister because I think West Ham... No, sorry, I prefer Mitoma because I don't like where McAllister is next, closer to Declan Rice. Those two central midfielders from West Ham, I think, could give McAllister problems. And then on the right side, I don't think they'll be able to create enough to create space for Solly March on that right side. So I think they're going to have to rely more on Mitoma's dribbling for this one. So I like Mitoma in this one, but I would probably go with McAllister long term because I want to be at the center of the creativity, and I'll take the risk. And if you want to go with two, depending on your chip strategy, I think that's fine as well.
I think, the two I would go for would be Mitoma and McAllister personally, as it stands. I've already got Mitoma. So that's part of my reluctance to wildcarding, because I feel like with 2 free transfers, I can have 3 doublers in 27. And then again, with 1 free transfer, I can have 10 players in 28. And I had a look. If I then was to take, say, like a -8, I could have, I think it was 12 doublers and, bench boost. So I could still bench boost with 12 doublers, and maybe wildcarders will have 13 or 14 doublers, but we're both going to want to keep like the likes of Saka and Haaland potentially as part of that bench boost. I then have a double game with goalkeeper and have someone like Ben White. So I have one or two more single game weekers than people who wildcard and bench boost in 29. But the way my team is set up, it's making me reluctant to wildcard for that reason, because of what you said. Because like Brighton blank in 28, I want to go heavy on them, but then I'm going to end up having 9 or 8 players potentially in 28, and I can get to 10 now with 1 free transfer. By just buying 2 Brentford players, right? So what this news has done for me, as someone who's maybe less likely to wildcard than you, is because I already have Mitoma, I might just move my 2 Liverpool assets in kind of Trent and Darwin and get to someone like Ben Mee or Rico Henry and pair that up with Tony, have 3 doublers, and just hope I don't fall too far behind, and then see what to do with the rest of my chips later. And I guess on the flip side, just before we move on from this matchup, is kind of what am I holding those chips on for? Because if the doubles in 34 and 37 are smaller and 32 the blanks more navigatable again, what am I holding them up? Is there any massive upside I can see that I wouldn't get now just from having a better team and getting onto it quicker and maximizing the fixtures? So that's a tough call for me. But Chelsea's another very relevant team, I think, for those wildcarding. Even those who aren't have Kepa, everyone's considering should they get a second one. As you know, I've had Reece James since game week 17, much to my dismay. It's not quite worked out for me yet, but I can't see how I would sell him now when he doesn't blank and has a nice double. So let's just hope he stays injury-free for a month until double game week 29. But what are your thoughts here? It's pretty bad, isn't it? Like in terms of, I think right now, when we look at Potter's record, I think he's got 1 win in 15 in the Prem or something. So that's not looking great. And he's got like 30 players in training. It's like a summer camp. It's difficult. Like, how do you bring them together? So I just feel he's got this monumental task, and Chelsea keeps saying they're going to hold on to him for the long term. But I reckon if they find an exit plan, they will. And he's got to start improving soon. So do you think Chelsea will turn this around? Do you think Potter will survive?
Oh, those are 2 different questions. I think if Potter doesn't survive, I don't think Chelsea will turn this around for a couple of years. If Potter survives, I think they have a chance to turn it around. But they're not going to. I don't think they'll turn it around this season. But I do think we'll see some attacking production based on what Potter wants to do this season, if he stays. And I guess I still believe in Joao Felix. I think his role has kind of changed, and this is the kind of indictment on Potter. Is Joao Felix was getting some great opportunities and making an impact, being kind of slingshot out of central midfield, right? And as Havertz creates space up front and pulls defenders away, Joao Felix gets slingshot out of central midfield, and he was on some great opportunities. And then in who'd they play last? I can't see that image, but
Spurs, they're 2-0 against Spurs.
Oh, right. Spurs. Then they play against Spurs, and Sterling's in there, and Joao Felix is stuck in behind Sterling. Joao Felix and Sterling played too close together. Sterling's coming inside and closing down the space that Joao Felix is trying to run into. Joao Felix is looking for an outlet pass. It's not there because Sterling wants to come inside. So this is where Potter has not done well tactically. I mean, if you bring Joao Felix in, right, in the transfer window, and you give him a really prominent initial role, and then you make a substitution that limits that role that you've just given your new player, and I think that's a bad form on Potter. But I since I rate him as a manager, I do think he'll figure it out. Unlike a manager like Brendan Rodgers, a lot of people are saying bring Iheanacho in, but when Brendan Rodgers needs a goal, he takes Iheanacho out. That's just because he's a bad manager. I don't believe Potter is a bad manager. I think he's made some mistakes with a totally unbalanced, lopsided squad that he has. I mean, these guys have about 4 inside left wingers and 3 outside left wingers. I mean, and Nkunku's coming in as well for another left winger spot. You have Sterling, you have Mudryk, you have Felix, you have Nkunku coming in. That's 4 left wingers right there. Pulisic is still on the side. There's another left winger. I mean,
Ziyech is still there.
Ziyech, he's on the right. He's a right winger, but we could do that as well, right? Play Ziyech on the right. How do you play Ziyech, a right-sided winger who cuts in on his left? That's all he does. You know he's going to do that. And not have Reece James overlapping him. What the fuck are you doing? So these are the indictments on Potter, why I think he could be fired. I think they're fireable offenses, to be perfectly honest. But I also believe in him as a manager, so I think he could turn it around. Who knows? The one thing that that's clear, I think, is I don't know where Mariner got that 3.2 FDR for Chelsea.
For Chelsea, yeah. So we've just seen in the chat, I think it's Akib put it up. So it wasn't just 1 win in 15, it's also 6 goals scored. So yeah, so it's really difficult. I think Felix is another one of those kind of vogue strikers alongside the likes of Watkins. We said that, Villa didn't take enough shots, and Watkins, maybe wasn't the best pick because of that, especially now that we know the likes of Tony for the double, Iheanacho for the doubles. What do you think about someone like a Felix? If we're saying Chelsea are not kind of scoring enough, is it that they're underperforming? Because I think they've had the 6 goals from a 16 XG. So that is quite crazy. And it reminds me a bit, obviously, at the beginning of his time at Brighton, that they would have high XG and not get as many goals. And, now that the Zerbi's there as well, people are saying, obviously, that's changed. So is this maybe a Potter system thing that they're getting lots of high XG, but actually those shots aren't that great?
Nope.
Is he getting them in the wrong positions, or are the squad just kind of under-delivering and it's not clear to them what he wants them to do?
I mean, the problems at Chelsea are top to bottom. Todd Bowley is a friggin' disaster of a person, of a human being. But it's not. People have created this Potter narrative, right? And then they see a team that's not performing, and then they revert back to this previous narrative that no longer applies. This is a different team. It's different personnel. They had players at different positions. So to answer that question, look at the individual metrics that make up NetxG there to the right of the raw NetxG number. And Chelsea, you can go down. Chelsea creativity 1.07, expected data 0.93, and shots 1.44. So they're getting the shots. But the creativity, creativity is basically big chances and zonal matchups. That's what makes up the creativity metric there. That's not there. So the big chances aren't there, and the XG, the expected data, is the worst of all. They're not getting high XG chances. This is not underperforming. This is under delivering shots, potentially because of a tactical mistakes from management and personnel mistakes from ownership. So that's why it's this ripple effect all over the place. But last week Mariners FDR for Chelsea was minus 1.4 away to Spurs. So for it to jump up to over 3, I think that's the best of the game week. I think is a bit crazy here. So I wouldn't go too hard. Like I do believe in Felix. He's in my squad right now, pre-wildcard. If I do wildcard, I doubt I'll have him in there.
So just to on the same note as well, we've obviously got this question in here. Just trying to find it. It's about who's got the better kind of stats. So Salah the Samurai asked, does Felix have similar stats to Watkins? So I've just had a look per 90 over the season, and at the moment, the numbers are in kind of Felix's favor, but obviously he's played a lot less. Primarily the ones that are most in his favor are the shots and the shots on target, through balls and crosses. But Watkins does have him for shots in the box, but just marginally. So it may be that Chelsea are taking these shots on target from outside the box, kind of generating that low XG that you were saying. But overall, I would still, personally, I think I would be quite tempted by Felix. But the fact that there's so many attacking players and you don't know what the system is, and any week 4 or 5 people are getting chopped and changed, I do think it's like a double defense or bust for me. I don't think I'll be going near him. I think there's other opportunities. Like I want Tony. I'm keeping Haaland. There's one slot free. You got Watkins, Iheanacho, Felix competing for it. I think it's going to be. Yeah,
Chelsea defense is a hard avoid for me. Hard avoid.
So Chelsea, you would even potentially move off the keeper. So that'd be a reason to wildcard for you. Like just move off.
Yeah, and honestly, that would be a reason to go Sanchez over Kepa.
No, I've just gone forward, but I guess with that accident as well. So yeah, so Sanchez over Kepa, I did like that shout earlier in the show. Just a shout out as well to Siva as well, who came in. Good to see you, mate, from the FPL Banger podcast.
Yeah, he's coming in to hear about Harvey Barnes.
Yeah, he's waiting for you.
He's waiting for the Harvey Barnes chat.
Exactly. So Wolves v Tottenham. Obviously, things were looking quite good for them under the, I guess, not interim manager, but temporary manager on the sidelines while Conte recovers from surgery. So good luck to him. It didn't go so well for them, though, in the Cup, did it? It was quite a disaster, really. They got knocked out of the Cup by Sheffield. They're now not blanking in 28. It means that they have kind of a Forest home fixture in 27 and Southampton in 28, which is going to be a blank. That's kind of making me worried as someone who did Kane to Darwin last week. That could be another potential reason for a wild card. So the idea is like maybe you go for Kane, Haaland, and Tony. Maybe you just don't go for any of Felix, Iheanacho, and these guys. Maybe this is the route. Maybe Kane is the one you have to get in.
Well, the fact that he doesn't blank in 28, I think.
I know he doesn't double in 29. Now, some people might be willing to kind of move him that week to maximize doublers for a bench boost. But if you're wildcarding this week, you're going to still have quite a few transfers, right? So you're going to have 2 transfers going into 28 and 29. So you still got 2 transfers to change the players you could target for now. So that's just one thing to think as well about, I think. In your perspective, do you see Tottenham kind of, because this is shocking for me to see the Wolves NetxG kind of above them. So for the podcast listeners, obviously it's 1.53 for Wolves, so 1.25 for Spurs away from home. That's kind of just what shocks me a bit. And I'm wondering whether you put that down to maybe the loss of Bentancur to an extent. So it's been a few games since he's been out now, and I think they don't really have someone to come in and make those line-breaking passes through the middle, be that engine. They were playing Skip. I know he got them a goal the other week, and like they just about, but that was a dreadful game as well. So Tottenham Chelsea was dreadful, honestly. Awful. Watching that was just it was awful, and so that's kind of my 2 cents there. But I'm someone who sold Kane. I don't know if I will be going back. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Especially when we look at these kind of numbers. I know he doesn't need like high metrics to score; he just gets a chance and scores. But he got 6 points last week. I'm perfectly happy spending that 3-4 mil on someone else and kind of boosting my squad personally. Like, I don't think just because he now has a fixture in 28, suddenly I have to have him back, even if it's Forest and Southampton. Maybe I'm the one who's deluded though, right? So everyone else seems to be piling back in on him, but I'm willing to take that risk. I just don't think Spurs score that much.
No, I mean, the metrics actually agree in this one. If you look at NetxG is, what's tilting it is the goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper, Sa takes out 0.24 from the NetxG value for Spurs, and Forster adds basically 0.27 to Wolves' NetxG value. So they would be flipped, and they would be more in line with Mariners, 1.4 for Spurs versus 1.0 for Wolves. It's almost exactly the same. So there's strong alignment in the data in this one. So I think we can kind of expect roughly like this kind of 1-1, maybe 2-1 either side type of game. The fact that Wolves are at home, could tilt it for them, but the zonals could tilt it for Wolves as well, right? Look at the positive zonals: 2.5 on the left, 2.5 down the center, and 2.4 on the right. And then what could tilt it for Spurs is the finishing. Look at the shots on target goal predictor compared to the shots goal predictor. It's lower chance for 0 and 1 goals and higher chance for 2, 3, and 4 plus goals. 4 pluses is the same. So Spurs' finishing could tilt it for them. So I see this as a relatively even game here. There's definitely a goal in it. Probably a goal for each side, which kind of dampens the defense. But the thing for Kane, like you have with Nketiah's injury, the fact that we don't want the reasons are continue to pile up, right? We don't want these City assets. We don't want De Bruyne. We don't want Mahrez. But to look at Kane now that they don't blank, that 29 where they don't double, he faces Everton. Like if you were on free hit, would you not have Kane in your side? You probably still would have Kane against Everton in a free hit side where there are doubles, right? And then just Wolves, Forest, Southampton, Everton before they hit Brighton and then Bournemouth. That run up to 32 could be another reason to wildcard. It's the fact that they don't blank. I was not planning on Kane at all. It was not in my thoughts because I just assumed they were going to blank. But now I think we do need to reconsider. Look at the headed matchup for Wolves though. 3.3 is solid head matchups for Wolves. Could we see a Dawson goal, for example?
I think so. What about the Spurs defense? So Salah Samurai asks, is the Spurs defense really that bad?
Yes,
and why not Foster as like a second goalkeeper? He's only 3.9 million, but I think it's just that idea that if you're bench boosting in 29, that one home game against Everton isn't going to be enough to entice me, and I'm probably never going to play him against the first player. Like if Raya doesn't blank in 28 either, like when am I actually going to play Foster? And if I don't want to bench boost him, like it just feels like it's not a move I would be wanting to make. I just think there's more upside in some of the other goalkeepers.
Yeah, and correction, I think I said Forster. I meant Foster. Names are too similar. But and then this goes to your first point when you first brought up the matchups, Nima. This matchup is with no Rodrigo Bentancur. Spurs defense is a hard avoid. There are so many better options, and there are budget options and different teams. Estupiñán, Trips is an automatic. Estupiñán could be in there. You have some budget defenders as well. I don't think any Wolves defense is worth going for. It's definitely not Ben Foster.
Yeah, so I think from these teams, like I've currently got Bueno. He went off injured in the second game against Liverpool. It's quite frustrating. I don't really know. I think he's another potential reason for that wild card to move on of that asset. So let's go to Southampton, Leicester. I think if you're on wildcard, Leicester also looks quite appealing, right? So they obviously don't blank now. They play Brentford in 28. They have a quite tasty double in 29. We don't know much about Maddison's fitness. Your best friend Harvey Barnes is also an option here. Is there any other assets you see from Leicester, or kind of is it really between those two? For me, I don't think they've shown enough for me to want to kind of go double up and get both Iheanacho and Maddison. And it feels Maddison's the better pick, and there's less striker slots, right? And there are already 4 or 5 strikers we might want. So it does feel that like a Maddison or a Barnes could be a nice squeeze into my midfield.
Yeah, I mean, so 2.05 NetxG for Leicester, it's quite strong. So, their attacking options are definitely worth considering. Southampton with a 1.29. Leicester's NetxG is, let's see, NetxG away, it's kind of like a bolstered there by Bazunu. Bazunu has been terrible, especially at home. We see the goalkeeper metric there at minus 0.55, which, to recap,
I don't think I've seen that often.
Yeah, so that adds basically 0.55 to Leicester's NetxG. If you're a person that doesn't consider goalkeepers then then you can just take off basically half of that NetxG, and Leicester's left around 1.5, which is similar to Southampton. Again, I think Mariner, the fact that Mariner's been away for a couple of weeks, I think his data is suffering. 3.0 FDR for Southampton is insane.
3.0, yeah.
I mean, look, just to look at that passing network. Their passes are a mess. They don't go anywhere. The furthest forward is El Yunusi. And on the right-hand side, and this is against Leeds, right, where you think that Southampton should be able to do something. None of the passing maps, the average passing positions on the right side, actually, yeah, from Ward-Prowse all the way to the right, none of them pass midfield.
There's literally like 2 lines going out of the halfway line.
Yeah, one to who is that up front there? Oh, I don't remember his name, but I can't see it. It's too small right now. But yeah, so I mean, Southampton attack is it's not. I would never consider it a 3.0. Let's see. And then the problem with Leicester is, and I wrote it here, I'll quote, they're managed by a man who takes off their best goal scorer and changes system when Leicester need a goal. Don't trust Brendan Rodgers. I think the only player to trust here is Maddison when fit. Even Harvey Barnes. I've recommended Harvey Barnes on several occasions this season, but
you're a changed man, yeah.
I have been, but I don't think this is one of those occasions, because the players on the right-hand side of Southampton are all so deep. I don't think that Barnes will have much space. So I would prefer Maddison.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning that way. I'm probably going to make that move in game week 28 itself. Mm-hmm. So I will have enough money to do Andreas to Maddison potentially and play him when I bench my kind of Brighton assets. So that'll be interesting. I think that game's probably doesn't deserve too much more. This one probably deserves the least airtime. So I think we give this one like the whole of 1 or 2 minutes. It's Nottingham Forest versus Everton for anyone listening on pod. I guess there are some Pickford and Tarkowski owners out there, but maybe those praying Patterson takes his spot back from Coleman. But yeah, this is a hard avoid for me. Like, I just don't know what you're going to... This just seems like, I don't know, like Forest at home, right? Like we know we've been... It's a cliche, but they have been doing quite well. And Everton, they don't like really create. Like they just, I don't know. Like they like when they play like a, last night I think it was I don't know if you can call it a 5-5-0 formation. Like maybe it was a 5-5-1 with more play up top, but really he was just there to drop deep and like hassle Jorginho or someone. Like he was in the midfield. So yeah, I'm not convinced by the way they play. Perfectly honest, I think it's just set pieces, and that's their kind of best opportunity, or a quick counter with hoofing the ball up the pitch. And without Calvert-Lewin as the focal point, I'm not sure that they can. But with Calvert-Lewin, I think they're a different beast, as they showed against Arsenal a few weeks ago. But
yeah, we don't have to spend much time on this one. I think the only thing to mention here, look at Everton's net XG is negative, and but look at Everton's XG shot map against Villa. They took 13 shots in the box and failed to score. So taking lots of shots, not able to score, goalkeeper performing to that extent of 0.72. That's for the goalkeeper metric for Forest. That's why the Everton net XG number is actually negative. It's not that net XG predicts Everton to score an own goal. This is Navas just dragging down all the numbers with a 0.72 goalkeeper metric. And I think this is Navas all day. If Everton are going to take a lot of shots and not score, and Navas is going to keep everything out, Navas is the only one. It's never going to happen, Silva.
For the podcast listeners, I was just saying, obviously, you've come round to Harvey Barnes, and maybe next you'll be saying Darwin Núñez is world class. So on that note, we come to Liverpool versus Man United, probably the most exciting fixture of this weekend. I'm really keen to see how these two teams perform against each other. What are your thoughts here? Obviously, United are going deep in many cups. They've already played through quite a congested period.
Mm-hmm.
But they do look revived. They look turned around. I think that cup win for them, that's going to be something that, midway through a season to win a cup is going to potentially want to go and win another one. So maybe they're going to try to go for the FA Cup or Europa. And people saying there's an outside chance of Premier League title challenge. So I think however slim it might be, like obviously mathematically, yes, but I don't think they can do it while going deep in all these cups. But in this game, obviously got Rashford. Hopefully he's going to be fine. I know he had like a bit of a injury knock and he didn't start. Garnacho started and got the winner yesterday. So overall, I've got 3 Liverpool players. What do you say to someone like me going into this matchup? Because right now, the NetxG is implying that I'm okay with my 3 Liverpool players and just Rashford. If people are going to wildcard into United assets and I'm going to keep my Liverpool for another week, could this be the week I get some gains on the wildcarders?
Nope.
You don't agree with the NetxG for, well, I guess it's only 1.27 to be clear. It's not exactly great, but
it's not good. 1.27 is not good, and you can see why. I put Liverpool's style of play this season. There's a radar map here, and I mean, they have a lot of passes and very few short passes. That's because their midfield sucks. Todi Gakpo is not one that's going to progress passes. He's going to progress the ball with his runs. He's going to run into space, but he's not going to progress the ball with passing. Their midfield is awful, and that's why I think United is going to overrun Liverpool in this one, and it's going to be because of that midfield. I wrote here that expect Erik ten Hag to instruct Man United to keep the ball in and around the central midfield areas and then go wide and deep areas. So you can expect kind of some hold up play in the center, maybe some kind of Ajax style possession in central midfield, passing around those terrible Liverpool players in central midfield, and then kind of like popping the ball into the corners for a marauding Shaw on the left or Dalot on the right. Even Bruno, if Bruno can pull wide from on either side, and Rashford can pull wide in those areas as well. So I just think that United have the edge here tactically. The shots goal predictor for Liverpool, we can see it's much better than United. Not much better, it's slightly better. I mean, 18% chance of 3 goals versus 11% chance for United, 10% chance of 4 or more goals. I would throw that out the window because it doesn't matter the shots that Liverpool take. Back to Siva's comments on Darwin Nunez, it's kind of Darwin Nunez and Mohamed Salah taking these shots who are not good shooters of the ball this season. Salah this season, Darwin Nunez in his career, he's not good yet. I'll give you that, Siva. I'll give you that. So he is getting better. You have, if we're honest, we have seen improvement from Darwin, but I think this is a game this is a statement game for United away. But Liverpool, I expect them to be somewhat conservative at home, not get overextended, not be vulnerable to United's counterattacks. But they have too many weaknesses that United can exploit for me, and it comes down to Rashford versus Alisson.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of my money's on Rashford.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm definitely going to be getting rid of Darwin, whether I wildcard or not. So I'm going to take that risk with Tony. I'm just going to go there and see what happens with the yellow cards and with his pending hearing as well. So I'm just going to go all in, I think. I really like Brentford's fixture, and I think that might actually be one of the ones we look at last. So overall, I'm still happy to keep Salah in this fixture, I think. I think Salah is someone who I'm going to move on to Bruno at some point, especially for that double. But it doesn't make sense for me to do it quite yet. I don't think I don't want to go for another midfielder in the same fixture. Yeah. I already think it's going to be quite an intense fixture, and I could see like a draw here, but it just really depends on, as you say, whether Man United slip up and make that error in the back to let Liverpool through, because it depends, away from home, United are quite tired. I could see them finding this difficult to break Liverpool down if Liverpool don't do anything too bonkers.
And Bruno's been playing a lot, but I do like him in this matchup against probably Fabinho, I guess. I mean, Fabinho played midweek as well, right? So Rashford versus Trent will not be pretty. So that's it depends which side of the fandom you're on in that one. It could be beautiful for certain fans. Your co-host being one of them, I think. Isn't Sam a United fan?
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, so he's going to enjoy that. I will probably still play Trent in this fixture. There was talk of him kind of obviously having played a lot of minutes coming off last game. I know Robbo didn't start. You do got to worry a little bit there about kind of, is your defender going to be the one that plays the fullbacks at Liverpool? You would think they're going to be out of the Champions League soon. I can't see how they turn it around against your boys Real Madrid. So it would be crazy. So.
Klopp should play the kids at the Bernabeu. Give them a nice a nice and difficult experience.
And just focus on the Premier League. So hopefully we see a settled 11. So that final game that we discussed, Brentford v Fulham. Obviously, you know, for Fulham, we've got João Paulinho. He's been a fantastic signing. He scored in the cup for them as well. He is going to be out, and I think he is the engine of their midfield. So there's a situation where it just seems to make sense to get on Tony now. And if he does pick up a yellow in this, I think I'd be happier having got him now for this game too, knowing he's going to go into the first game of the double with the chance to be suspended for the second game, than if he already had 9 and I'm looking to buy him next week. So with Darwin facing United and Brentford against Fulham without Paulinho, I just think whatever I do, whether I wildcard or not, that Darwin to Tony move is coming forward to this week. And the matchup from a NetxG point of view doesn't give me too much hope for why it's better, but I guess it doesn't account for the lack of Paulinho in the data as well. Now, I know the FDR, though, does favour Brentford quite a lot, so there's a bit of discrepancy here between the metrics.
And I think the FDR has kind of generated a lot of kind of extreme, and on the positive side, that we've had several over threes, and that's unique. So again, I have to question with Mariner traveling and all of that. I know he's not drinking, so he hasn't had a drop since his heart attack. So it's not that, but something's up here. Yeah, Brentford 0.6 NetxG compared to Fulham 0.95. That 0.6, you can see it comes from Leno. 0.66 goalkeeper metric. If you add that, if you don't want to factor in Leno, which I think would be a mistake because his form has been outstanding, maybe the best in the league since restart, really. Then it jumps up to 1.26. Still not great, but I think the stats haven't taken into account what you just said about Paulinho. I think that the loss of Paulinho is as big or bigger than the loss of Rodrigo Bentancur for Spurs.
Like when you look at this passing network for here, like he is the heart of the team. Yes. Like there are balls coming in and out of him in every direction apart from back to the goalkeeper. He collects it from the centre backs. He gives it to the attackers, the wingers, the other midfielders. He's just the heartbeat of the team. He's honestly been such a fantastic player. I'd say he's been one of the kind of top signings for me this season in terms of what he's shown in the Premier League in his first year.
I mean, over the course of the season, as or more important than Mitrovic.
Yeah, he's been pretty much like top 1 or 2 most important player for Fulham this season.
Yeah, and we see Fulham's penetrations coming from that left-hand side. It's been like that most of the season, so that should continue, which makes you think that their right side, so Brentford's left side, should see some action here, despite the, it says 1.3 for the zonal matchups. I would disagree with that 1.3, and I would bump it up to over 2, maybe 2.5, precisely because Tony likes to drift to the left in that left half space, sometimes even wide, and then combine while Mbeumo runs free on the other side, similar to Sully March. Right, Mbeumo has that kind of Sully March role on the right hand side, but Tony, if Fulham leave like Diop isolated there, I think Tony could combine. Maybe Wissa will be on that left hand side. I'm not sure. And then in this one, something to not ignore as well as the headed matchups. 2.4 generally positive, and for that reason, that's another reason to like Tony. And another reason to wildcard for me is I can't get to Tony with one free transfer unless I sell someone like João Felix. And that doesn't make much sense as far as planning goes. So I would have to take a hit for Tony and like sell De Bruyne for Mitoma or something like that, or McAllister or something, like do some kind of surgery, taking hits to bring Tony in. And I think Tony is an important player to have right now. The other thing I'll say is Pinnock as well. Pinnock is an aerial threat. I think he could do well. And of course, Ben Mee, who has scored some goals from corners this season.
Yeah, so just on that note, obviously, we kind of don't necessarily fully rate Brentford's defense away from home. So obviously not this week, but in general, because, for the double, both of them are away from home. So Salad Samurai mentions this, and he's obviously thinking about this. On that same note, Travis McKill says, what do you think of bringing in Jensen? Seems more likely to haul in game week 29 than one of their defenders, given the tough games on the road. So yeah, so he's a 4.8 million midfielder game. He's got 3 goals and 5 assists this season. My problem with kind of the midfielder was I was looking at Brentford, and I was kind of thinking that bar Tony, which is a shoe-in, I don't see any midfielder I would want. Now, Whistle was exciting, but they don't always play the 4-3-3. They do sometimes play the back five and have the two strikers, Antonio and Mopuemo, up top. So Whistle feels like a minute's threat. We remember De Silva, who everyone tried to use as a money-making scheme earlier in the season to see him price rise. They were selling Andreas for De Silva early on. But Jensen's another one, and I think, again, for me, it's just not for me. I don't think I'd be going there personally. I really just like the defense. I know they are better at home, but I like the likes of kind of Pinnock, Rico Henry you mentioned, Ben Mee if you've got the money to go a bit higher, for instance. Raya for, the saves, just the sheer number of chances that away from home they should concede, and hopefully they're low quality chances, so Raya can pick up some saves there. He's made the most saves this season, I think, of any goalkeeper in the Premier League. So something like a Raya Tony double up seems good to me. I see the appeal of having 3 of them, so you have an extra player in 28, but I would argue just to have 2 personally. So that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. And I don't know if I could recommend Jensen personally, but maybe you think differently based on the tactics.
I like the triple up. I like and I think it's easy to get to the triple up because of Raya. Raya, Tony, they pick themselves, and then to pick one more is quite simple. I think the Henry has the best XGI. I was having a conversation with Libero FPL, and then he was doing some research into the Brentford player in the Brentford defenders. He brought up Pinnock, which I thought was interesting. I don't think Mee is worth the money. I think I would actually go Henry 1, Pinnock 2, and then Mee 3. Maybe Pinnock over Henry, but Pinnock if Jansson comes back, he may take Pinnock's place, so he might be at risk. But to get to Matthias Jensen, the value in Jensen lies in the fact that he takes corner kicks. So it's those corner kicks that could lead to some kind of headed goal or something like that. But he takes up a midfield spot. He could be your budget midfielder, I guess, but you are relying on kind of corner kicks to see something. Whereas if you go with a defender like Henry gets crosses into the box. He has, I think, the best XGI of the defenders. Or you could go with somebody like Pinnock, who provides an aerial threat, and I think he's 4.4 million. I would probably go just because their assets are so cheap. They have doubles coming up. I think it's quite easy to triple up.
So would you be looking at like a Raya, Henry, Tony on a wildcard, for example?
Yeah, probably.
Sounds good to me. Just a final question before we go to the captaincy metric from Elron as well. So he asks, when will Tony get his ban? So at the moment, it sounds like the hearing could be, they've said they're not sure, it's not confirmed, but it could be in April. There's talks that he won't be able to go with the England squad for the internationals between game week 28 and 29. I think it's in Brentford's favour, seeing as where they are in the league table is quite safe, to want him to kind of serve this soon, because a lot of those 6 months minimum could be served in the summer break and still count as a ban. So they could have him back as early as September potentially. So I think they'd be keen for him to do it sooner. I know he has admitted some charges, but there are also some that he hasn't. And now he's put out a personal message to insult the FA for leaking news of this twice during the process after telling him it's all confidential. And his lawyers have got in touch about the FA conducting an inquiry into the leaks. So maybe that drags it out a bit as well. So I think for me, I'm just going to roll the dice. I'm more concerned about the 2 yellows in the next 2 than I am in the ban itself. And when and if that proper ban comes, I'll be ready to swiftly move on. So this is just a quick matchup summary of the week. I don't know if you want to call out maybe just the top 2 or 3, and then we'll go straight to the captaincy so everyone can see what the best transfers might be this week. I'm keen to see if the Arsenal boys can top it again.
Okay, well, and for the FDR summary here for the matchups in the FDR attack, we have 3 teams over 3 this week, and that's Arsenal home to Brentford. Bournemouth. Sorry, Arsenal home to Bournemouth, and at 3.1. Brentford home to Fulham at 3.2, and City home to Newcastle at 3.0. The best in defense, we have Arsenal again, home to Bournemouth, 2.6. Brighton, interestingly, home to West Ham at 2.1. And then the rest are quite demure, quite below those 2. Best zonal matchups, we're looking at, let's see. On the left,
Haaland.
Of course, that's always going to show. So
that's always going to be there.
In seasons past, it was always Liverpool's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember those days.
It's always going to be City Central, right? 3.3. Arsenal Central 2.9, and Arsenal Right 2.8, and Arsenal Right 2.9 are interesting. Oh, sorry, Aiden captain Nketiah last week per the metric, and then he doesn't start either game. That's just, sorry, buddy. That's hard. But the zonal matchup for Arsenal, 2.8 in the center and 2.9 on the right. For me, that's another sign that Odegaard is the pick this week, because both those matchups are lighting up, and he playing in that half space, playing in central midfield, where he'll have more space versus a deep block. I think everything's lining up for Odegaard here. What else stands out? And then the other thing that I'll say, like, just take a quick look at the headed matchups. There are several strong headed matchups this week. Arsenal 3.2, Brentford 2.4. Let's go with, I'm going to skip Fulham, skip Leeds. Liverpool 3.1, City 2.6. I'm going to skip Forest, Southampton, and then Spurs 2.9. So just some headed punts if you're looking that way.
Nice one. So before we go into the captaincy, just a quick shout out to our haulers. So we have on our Patreon, we have Elron and Lucy and Gan. We have super haulers on YouTube, Harbour Boy, Daddy Bot, Greenback Golf, Tahar, Robbie, William is one of our first haulers, and then Tursks, Catherine, Dom, Claire, FPL DG Boy, Akshay, C Hunt, Lindsay, Davindra Raj, Fancy Football Casuals, Tom Gurush, Blonde, S Scotters M, FPL Teacher, Oscar Arias, Donny FPL, FPL Mike Halpin, Kevin Rose, Podner, FPL Craig, and Dread. So thank you all for your support. If you want to become a YouTube member as well, or a Patreon, the link in the description to support the channel, you can do so and join the Discord, where we will release data every week. Now let's play the jingle. I think I'm really excited to see who the captains are this week. I've been waiting for this moment. While Arsenal are doing well, I put the jersey on, and when we're not, I wear a different top, as you may have noticed. So as long as we're top of the league, I'll be here in my Arsenal jersey. Saka has finally made it to the top after Odegaard and Nketiah trumped him over the last few weeks. So he's here at first with 87 on the metric. Haaland is in second on 85. Tony is in third on 83. And Nketiah is still here on 82. Fernandez on 81, which you shouted out in terms of the matchups. Harvey Barnes is snuck in as well. Good to see. We've got some of our good old friends here. Odegaard is a bit further down, but I think he's still a very good asset, and I would rather have him than Nketiah as it stands. And Mahrez kind of sneaks in with Kane at the bottom, 74 apiece. What's your kind of initial thinking? I'm on Saka for my bus team captain already. I was looking at Haaland just out of pure fear, but everything seems to point to, like, I should be going for Arsenal asset at home to Bournemouth.
So Saka. So let's talk about Saka versus Odegaard a little bit here, and the reasons why Saka is ahead of Odegaard, and it's basically returns, right? Where Saka is at 76th percentile, Odegaard 45th percentile. The points, obviously, with returns come points, so points will be lower, but points for Odegaard. So returns are 45th percentile versus 76th percentile, but returns are 71st percentile versus 88th. So it's much closer, and it's because of the bonus points, right? So I think Odegaard has more ways to kind of points because of those bonus points. NetxG should be the same. I don't know why it's not there. The rest is pretty similar. So it just depends on. So it's kind of like results-based thinking. Well, since Saka has scored more points and has more returns, then you should captain him. So what's that? Is that his
Oh, the one that I was singing, the
one you were
your
saying,
defense is in trouble and Nketiah is in the room.
That's hilarious. So I think that the reason Saka tops this metric is really just results-based thinking. And past results doesn't necessarily lead to future results, as we know. So I would go more into process, and that's why I would lift Odegaard over Saka. And the captaincy metric hasn't been as bang on this season as it has in seasons past, except for at the beginning of the season when it was obviously Haaland all the time. So I think there is room to kind of pick apart some things here. In terms of some of the other players, I think Holland, it's just a tricky matchup against Newcastle. I would probably want to stay away with that from that. I think Tony is a legit captaincy shout, though. I really like that he's high up there in the metric and could be a consideration over the Arsenal players. What do you think?
Captain him before he gets suspended in the double. Get as many points as you can, everyone. That's my thoughts. No, I'm pretty set on Saka, but that's because I don't have Odegaard, so it's really kind of Saka versus Haaland for me. But if I was to wildcard, that may swiftly change should Odegaard come into my team. This Tony thing, it just makes me think whatever, as I say, happens, he is my signing. Like, I'm not rolling this week. I'm buying him. Whether I wildcard or not, he is coming in either way. So
take that thinking, Matt. What if you couldn't get to Tony with just one free transfer?
Depends who else was left in the team. So, because I guess you'd be looking to move on someone like a De Bruyne to the Brighton asset. So it's kind of, is City's fixture this week better than, Brighton's fixture this week? And do you want to go a week early on that, or can you wait 2 weeks and use
Brighton also
transfer?
blank? I'm like piling it on Brighton, and then they're going to blank, and then I don't have 11, and then I'm getting into a corner that I'm going to have to take hits to get out.
Depends who your defenders are as well. So I guess if you've got the likes of kind of Trent in there, but I suppose you free hit it, so I don't know who you had the week before.
Trips, Estupinian, White, Shaw, and Botman.
See, that's tough because you already have the Newcastle player for their double, you have them for the blank, you have the Brighton defender. We don't know too much about the fitness, but we'll get to that in the Q&A because there's a question about that.
Fine. Estupinian is fine.
It seems he's fine, yeah. I think he's just going to be back in time. So is it the week for a gamble? So Mike says, who's feeling a gamble? Maybe that's what the metric says this week. That this is because I think it's a gamble going against Haaland in the first place. So I'm up for a gamble, and I think because of those rose-tinted glasses, I'm kind of keen to just not go Haaland, and as a non-wildcard, Saka is the only one. So if I buy Tony, maybe that would change. Maybe Tony is someone that I would bring up to the top of the conversation.
And the other question, Mike, is who's feeling a gamble, and how do we gamble? Do we gamble with the wild card? Do we gamble by not wild carding? Do we gamble by taking a hit to bring Tony in? Do we gamble with our captaincy? Like, there are so many, and this goes back to the philosophy, right? This is our strategy and our planning. This is when our true FPL selves kind of come into the fore, and where you have to make decisions on how you'll gamble. I gambled last week by using the free hit. Whether it was a success or not, I think is a really complicated question. Because I'm happy I don't have Darwin. I'm happy I don't have these Liverpool players. I'm happy I scored 89 points on a free hit. But did I need to? It was a 20K green arrow less, like maybe, it was about 20K green arrow up to 136K. I didn't take hit, so I don't know. It's a how do we
hard to know, how you come out. Because now the question is, like, because you've free hit and you've held on to kind of the likes of Brighton and Newcastle, in your situation, maybe I'm biased because I'm considering not wildcarding myself, but I would maybe just take that hit and bring in Tony, who doesn't blank, as part of that move, and I would be okay fielding 9 or 10 in 28. I think even wildcarders will field 10 at best because they're going to want to go heavy on the doubles, right? So it depends how many doublers you can get, and I think you can have as many doublers as the wildcarders will in 27 from where you are now.
The problem is, what do I do with De Bruyne and Mahrez, right? What if they don't play?
Yeah.
And I have both, and my bench isn't good. I have Shaw, has.
So could you do like Mahrez to a Brighton mid and then Tony?
Yeah, I could, and then keep De Bruyne.
Yeah, just for this week. But then again, like, he could then be moved on, so he could become like your Maddison in 28 when he's got a blank and then he's got a double coming. So I just feel I would plan it out, because I think you might know. I think the way I would look at it for anyone who's listening, my advice kind of for this week would be check your projected wildcard team, because I've been looking at 29 and the bench boost I can do without my wildcard seems okay, right? Like 12 doublers, 3 singlers, 1 is Haaland, Saka, and White. So I don't know. The other thing is, because the fixtures are now clear, right? And I think we should go back to this slide now, just as we wrap up the show, because the fixtures after 32 onwards are clear. 32 is going to be a smaller blank than we thought. 34 and 37 are going to be smaller doubles. A lot of the teams that double in 27 and 29 will be the ones that potentially double in 34 and 37. You could, I don't know, like it just feels like you could navigate. Like that power of the wildcard 33, bench boost 34 seems gone for me. So do I really want to do that? That's kind of the question. That's where I'm at. And I think maybe I'm going to try and just ride along without it. But you have more assets from Brighton and Brentford than me, I think. And you're potentially going to wildcard, whereas I guess I'm considering taking some hits for a bench boost and having a wildcard and free hit left.
I only have one Brighton. I have no Brentford.
One Brighton. Okay. So you have Newcastle. I mean, you have the double, right? I
have double Newcastle. But I mean, just so yeah, looking at Ben Crellin's schedule here, Podna says, I'm going to gamble with Tony. He loves to gamble. Nice. Looking at Ben Crellin's schedule here, you can see it's not hard to plan, right? A free, like if you're thinking, if you free hit now, not free hit, sorry, if you wildcard now, it's not hard to plan the rest of the season. So why wait? There's not that much information that we're waiting on. And most of that information is for 34 and 37, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I would agree.
When we have all of this information, and when we see you can lay out a plan for yourself almost for the rest of the season, why wait to wildcard? Why not enact that plan right now instead of sitting on double Newcastle defense, triple City, no Tony, taking hits?
It's difficult because for me, obviously, that's what I mean by it's so team dependent. I wouldn't be taking hits. So like I would get to the free doublers. I'd have the, Tony and a Brentford defender, Mitoma, that would be my free for 27. I'd have 10 players in 28 by bringing in Maddison for Andreas. That would be a free transfer as well. And then I could just do Salah to Bruno in 29. And suddenly I've got like a really good 11 and a benching headache even with my doublers and single game because that week. Or I could, go one step further, make it free transfers in 28 instead of just a free transfer. And that's where I can bring in Shaw to add to Bruno, or I can bring in an Iheanacho, I can bring in a Watkins, I can, add one more attacker for a double and then bench boost. So for me, it's just tough because I think I don't have as many of the fires. Like I've already got rid of Mahrez, right? I don't have double Newcastle. Like I've got rid of my assets that are probably causing problems in many people's teams. So I think you do have to look at your own team and make that call, because if you copy your favorite content creator, it's going to probably end horribly, if I'm perfectly honest. Now let's go to a couple of questions in the two heads mode. I'm going to quick fire these because I've actually got to get to the vet for a routine checkup in a moment. So I'm just going through. Quick shout out to the Mariners from Travis and to the Blades for letting him bring in Kane this week. We have Salah the Samurai getting rid of Eddie, definitely. Iheanacho, Tony, maybe more Buemo if you think Tony's going to get banned. I think for me, that's just a straight Tony. After everything we've said in the show so far, it's got to be Tony for me, Salah. So Travis asked about whether that kind of change in style with, I guess, Trossard playing through the middle and drifting more, and also like, the likes of Martinelli and Zinchenko playing on the right to go against deep blocks, if that's going to help Ben White's offensive output. And I would tend to think it does. Yeah, I think last two games, there's been some great crosses he made where they could have potentially both been assists, and the person he gave it to just didn't quite finish it and get it on target. So, we've been unlucky to not get an assist from him, I think, in these two last games. So one from Akib, what if Raya and Pinnock or Ferguson and Mitoma? So he was saying to not, because I was talking about Sanchez and Pinnock or something. So he's saying go double defense on Brentford and then get the attacker from Brighton instead of the two midfielders. So I think there's just too many attackers I want. And as great as Ferguson has been, he's not someone I'm going to go to just because I think it will cause me issues down the line. So Travis also mentioned Sanchez gave up 6 penalty kicks in the 9 games since De Zerbi took over. So, maybe it does look a little bit bad because of that when we look at Brighton's defensive numbers. And it's been 5 straight without a pen since that. So that's worth thinking about. We've got where is Cucurella? So I think that's just a bit of a comedy question. We're not going to entertain that, Akim. Liam's got a serious question. None of my rivals in my mini league have the wild card. Does that make it an easier decision for me to use my wildcard now, set up for the upcoming doubles and blanks? I would tend to think so. So one of my colleagues, he's in a mini league, is quite competitive, always competitive, use their chips. I beg the question of if you care more about this mini league than overall rank, I beg the question of why you would hold on to the chip. I'm holding on because I'm thinking about like maximizing my praying and hoping for OR. But if you've got a mini league and everyone below you or ahead of you has finished using their chips, go right ahead. They're going to be playing catch up with you the rest of the season if you get ahead now. So
or if you don't pray because you're an atheist, then you might as well just hit it.
Just hit it anyway. So we said we don't think Purvis's injury is too bad. Hopefully, we have Salad Samurai mentioned he liked Bowen more than Madison from 29 onwards. So Bowen's an interesting shout. I think for 29, for me, it's difficult. I think it's going to have to be one or the other. I won't have space for both. And
yeah, but I might be with who said that? Was that Elron?
I think it was maybe Salad Samurai.
Salad Samurai. I might be on that too. Bowen over Madison. I think Bowen. The one thing that I forgot to mention when we covered West Ham is the SOU-LEI having more of a nailed role, and he's getting further forward. That pushes Bowen inside, so he's almost right as a second striker, and that's where Bowen did all of his damage from last season. And the shots he should have hauled. He should have hauled. Our Dr. appointment's so rare in London
that you need to see the vet. I love
that. We won't make any. We won't go into NHS right now because we don't have time. But
next time we will.
Next time we might. But yeah, I think the SOU-LEI makes Bowen a really interesting option. We saw more shots from that kind of like right half space spot in the box, and they've been taken by Bowen. So he was unlucky not to haul, only get an assist in the four goal romp of Forest. So I might be looking at Bowen over Madison as well.
Okay, nice. For me, because if I don't wildcard and Madison plays in 28, I think that would be my move for Andreas. So because I'd have to have someone who plays in 28, it makes it more difficult for me. Elron's question, just the last 2-3 questions before we go, and I do really need to go, is Trent to a Brentham defender or save the free transfer and have 2 next week?
That's a shout out to FML FPL where they call Brentford Brentham, which I love. So nice reference there, Elron. What do you think? Trent to Brentham defender or save the free transfer?
It's tough because I'm doing Darwin to Tony, so I'm not one to speak. I was originally going to roll, but I want to get my Brentford player sooner. I think Trent, if Liverpool are going to do something against United, and that is arguable whether they will, I do think Trent's creativity will be needed. So I'm holding on to Trent this week, but maybe that's because I've got the bigger fight. Equally, when you then see Trent versus Bournemouth the following week, which is what I've seen in my team, and I'm looking to sell him that week for the Brentham defender, it's a bit harder to sell him before Bournemouth. So maybe you just get out now so you also miss the United game. It's arguably tougher, right? So yeah, I think if you aren't wildcarding and you're looking to get in ahead of the Brentford assets, it's not too bad a shout.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you would do on wildcard or next week anyway, then I would definitely do it this week.
Yeah. So Catherine A as well from one of our haulers. If you had Tarkowski, Mahrez, Bueno, and Gakpo, would you wildcard? I do have Kane and me and free Arsenal.
Yes.
So I think for me, like, it depends how badly you want Kane. So again, like for me, if I was to wildcard, primarily it would be to get Kane and Tony at the same time and somehow get Odegaard instead of Nketiah. So it's kind of like a shuffle. So if that's depending on which free Arsenal assets you have, and if they're the ones you really want, then I do think having Kane and a Brentford defender already is quite good. Like, couldn't Mahrez just become like a Brighton midfielder, and Gakpo could become someone like a Maddison as well, potentially who plays. I think there's opportunities here. Like, I'm not sure. It's a tough one, Catherine. Send your full team.
Who knows if Mahrez will play? Tarkowski's useless. Gakpo's useless, and he'll be rotated now.
Bueno's injured. Yeah, he does. But the thing is, without knowing who the subs are and stuff, like, I think I need to see a full screenshot. So I don't want to give advice on 4 versus 4 because it could sound good on paper, but there might be something in your squad
that's true. We're lacking some context. But if you look at the problems, right? Tark, Mahrez, Bueno, and Gakpo. But the player you want to bring in this week is Tony, but you don't have a problem in forward. So just the setup is all wrong. The players you want to move out won't get you the player that you want.
But unless you already also have Tony, but I imagine you would have
said that.
So final question, and we're out of here. So from Siva, FPL Banger, thoughts on triple Arsenal mids, Oda, Saka, Gabriel Martinelli on Wildcard? I've seen a few people with this draft. I really like it, but I don't think it's for me.
So I love it because the midfielders are so tough to pick, and this kind of takes care of that, right? But as an Arsenal fan, what do you expect all three of them to, I guess, return regularly enough to own an FPL?
I think so. I just still put Martinelli's minutes as like something that with Jesus when he comes back as well. It's a question because you could argue that Jesus' return will be even better for Martinelli.
Yeah.
So you're actually getting him in ahead of that.
Yeah.
Or you could say that, Nketiah has been carrying a knock, and once Nketiah, Trossard, Jesus are fit, Smith Rowe's back. There's a lot of players, and maybe the minutes will be more managed. But I don't think Martinelli needs much time on the pitch to score either. So it's a difficult one. I just think that with the likes of Bowen and Maddison, we discussed, with the likes of Brighton mids, Bruno, who I want in the double, there's just not enough positions for me to give away that third slot to an Arsenal midfielder, and I would much rather spend it on a defender. If I was to go for a defender, I think I'd pair Odegaard and Saka with someone like Zinchenko as it stands. I kind of really like Zinchenko a bit more than Gabriel at the moment, just because I feel he's one of the first names on the team sheet when fit. And he's not going to have the same goal threat as a Gabriel, but he is involved in, breaking down the deep blocks as we've seen in the last few games. So that's everything this time. It's been good to see you, Gabriel. We've gone live at a very unusual time, which is UK afternoon, which has been good for me as well. We will be back for the double in 27, and hopefully by then we'll see whether you've activated that wild card and whether I've caved in and joined you.
Totally. I didn't hit it live on air, but after going through this with you, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it.
Nice.
I can see that. I can see the season planned through Ben Crellin's planner, and it just gets shortened. And I've always been an early wildcard guy because I like to maximize the weeks, and I think I can plan the rest of the season with a wild card. So I'll probably join Catherine. Catherine said she's probably going to do it as well. So yeah. Oh, really quickly on Siva's question, if you have the three Arsenal midfielders, right? And you have, obviously Rashford is nailed, and then you have only one spot that you're rotating. If anybody comes up, if like it's a lot a lot of real estate to take up, say you have McAllister and Matoma there now, and you're going to be rotating that spot, and to get that spot to Bruno, for example, could take surgery. It could be difficult. So I think I would probably, and then their defensive fixtures, Arsenal's defensive fixtures, they have Bournemouth, Fulham, Palace, Leeds before they hit.
They sound pretty good, right?
So they sound like some clean sheets in there.
I think so. All right, well,
had at least one defender, and I agree with you. Zinchenko's the pick of the lot, but my question with Zinchenko is, given his hamstring issues, given Europe, will he be rotated?
What will happen?
Yeah, and Tomiyasu, he can do a job on either side, right? And he can lock
it. Not just Tierney, yeah.
So yeah, so I think there are options. I'd probably go with the safer Gabriel.
Yeah, nice one. All right, well, good luck everyone in Game Week 26. May your arrows be green. If you enjoyed this episode, do hit that like and subscribe. We will see you next week.
Sorry about that.
Cheers, guys.